I'm excited to announce our new user source listener, which is extremely powerful. This identifies your visitors' traffic sources in real time as they enter your website. So imagine the source medium report from Google Analytics, but with more ability to customize the individual channels or source values. And then imagine that it's being pushed into the data layer in real time so you can do whatever you want with that inside of Listen Layer or inside of Google Tag Manager. So I've just enabled the listener. Let's jump to our features screen and start taking a look at how this works. Now, of course, we want to look at our activity features first because this is what pushes information into the data layer. And we have this capture user source feature, which pushes the source information every time a new source is known. So at a high level, this is how this works. When a user first comes to your website and starts a session, that user source information is going to be pushed into the data layer. And every time they come from a new session that's identifiable in your rules, which we'll look at in a minute, we're going to push a new value into the data layer. The only time that's not going to happen is with direct. You're only going to get a direct visit if a user's session, their time-based session, actually ends before they come back to your website again. So the rules around this, by default, are structured in a way that it's very useful out of the box. Every time a user comes from a traffic source that you care about, it's going to be identified in real time. Now, in addition to this capture user source feature, we have our standard features, such as being able to write rules which will push values into the data layer, being able to actually store values from the data layer into browser. This one is extremely powerful when it comes to the user source feature. So jump in and take a look at this video because it's customized for this user source feature, and it's one of the most amazing features inside of Listen Layer. And then we have our monitoring, where we can write rules to receive notifications based on data layer activity, and our reporting, where we can track this user source information over time. And of course, we have our standard events screen and variables screen. So variables, this collects information that the listener sees in the data layer or pushes into the data layer over time. So all the variables that it will ever sees inside the data layer will appear here. And then the events, of course, there's one event available inside of this called the user source. And let's just go ahead and turn that on. And what we'll notice is we have a new screen here called the user source rules. Now, we're going to walk through this at a high level, but definitely jump into the specific video for capture user source because it's, and that'll be posted here soon, because that is going to walk you through in detail how these user source rules work, as well as how the overall kind of session rules work and those types of things. But it's important to know that there's no customization needed for this listener. You can just turn it on and start using it. And that's because we have system default rules, and you can actually create rules of your own. And when those rules are created, they'll actually exist above the system default rules, so they will apply before the default rules. And if they don't apply, it'll fall back down to these default rules. And in general, we have some out-of-the-box rules that are looking at the UTM source and specific values in the UTM source, or in this case, the existence of a Google Click ID, and we return a user source value. So Google Ads Remarketing, Discovery, whatever that is. Now, you can overwrite these, you can delete them. You can always revert back to the default if you want. You can export this table and re-import it. You can overwrite the entire table. A good quick example is you might have a situation where you use something like Capterra. And so you might say, if my UTM source contains Capterra, then I want this to be called Capterra Paid. So if that's as much customization as you need, then you can simply do it inside of this table. Or you can write an entire table that can use more than just one URL parameter, and you can customize your user sources based on that. Now, it's important to note that what we're doing here is we are returning a user source for what I would call controlled traffic sources. You know, these are traffic sources where you can actually append a UTM, or you can decide to include a Microsoft Click ID or a Facebook Click ID. So you kind of control these, and therefore we write the rules for those first. there's a default out-of-the-box rule below that is referrer rules. So these are going to be for traffic sources that are not really controlled by you. And this is where you can basically convert what would otherwise be considered referral traffic into a specific user source. So you can see here, anything that contains www.google is going to be considered Google organic. But keep in mind that we had the other rule with all the UTM sources that is more of our controlled traffic sources, and that's going to be that's going to apply first, and therefore like our advertising traffic is going to hit that rule first before this referral information. But again, let's say you had Capterra traffic, and in this case you have paid and organic. I'm not sure if Capterra even has organic traffic anymore these days, but you could have a rule here that would say Capterra organic. And of course, the one that we added in the previous table will apply first because it's above this rule set. And if you're not familiar with how rule sets work, then I would encourage you to jump into the custom data layer values videos and learn how to write rules. What you'll do is you'll enable this, and that'll create this screen will appear here, custom values. You can go there and you can click on a button that says how to write rules, and you will learn a lot about how the rules work inside of Listen Layer. It's a long video, but it is the most powerful feature inside of Listen Layer, so you should learn it and understand it deeply. So for now, we're going to use our out-of-the-box rules, and we just want to illustrate how this works. We're going to be looking for this user source event. We're going to go ahead and publish this, and we're going to call this user source because we just turned it on. And then we're going to jump to our demo site here and see if it reconnects. It did reconnect. Now, I have visited this site before. So notice we don't have a user source activity appearing in the data layer because I simply just refreshed the page and I was already a user here. But one of the most important features of this is anytime that same user comes with a new user source defined, it's going to be pushed into the data layer. So that way we know, hey, somebody maybe came from organic, but then 2 hours later, they technically would have still been in their same time session, but we're going to push that user source again because they came from a new traffic source. So let's put GCLID in here as if we had just clicked on a Google ad, and let's see what happens. We'll notice now in my data layer activity, I have the user source information, and you can see source is Google Ads. Now where this is coming from is the user source rules again. You can see it's hit this value right here. Let's put UTM Google Discovery. And this would be as if you you can see the data layer activity here in the console. So our user source came in, and now check this out, Google Ads Discovery. Very cool. So it seems simple, but this is so powerful because we can actually use this information to build our own attribution models. And all of this is first-party data. So we're not relying on third-party data, and we're not having to wait until Google Analytics activity settles, and we can build our own model based around the traffic sources that we care about. Now, note some really cool things. We can actually insert information into the user source. So we could actually insert a data layer variable. We could insert a function such as a timestamp. And so that can be really powerful and really cool. For example, maybe you want to put the timestamp at the end of this separated by a pipe and parse it out in BigQuery, or you could even just put another variable into the data layer using these custom using the custom value rules inside of Listen Layer, and you can collect that and use that for your own data model. So real fast, let's just hit on another important feature of the user source, and that's the browser storage. I would highly recommend that you jump into browser storage and you understand how this works for a user source. We're going to talk about how you can actually build a true attribution model and how you can truly understand when somebody takes an important action on your website, exactly where they've come from You can map that out and you can get as complicated or as simple as you want. So make sure you jump into the capture user source video, which will be posted soon, the browser storage video, and learn as much as you can about this user source, because this is one of the most exciting listeners that we've ever built.